Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to this week's Talking Heads podcast. It was a little quieter on the programme this week as we shared the airwaves with our sister station Vauxhall Radio TT. But there was still plenty to talk about, including restrictions on queenie fishing and dogs in pubs. But first, on Monday, the potential challenges posed by climate change. Here's Stu Peters to take up the story.
Proposed policies to tackle potential future environmental challenges have been given the backing of the island's politicians last month. It represents a joined-up approach to sustainability, taking the needs of the economy and society as well as the environment into account. The island already has an agreed target of an 80% reduction of 1990 emission levels by 2050. But just how is it envisaged that target could be met? And what potential threats could climate change pose to the Isle of Man? To discuss those issues, we're joined in the studio by Minister for the Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture, Richard Ronan, Richard Lowell, DEFRA Chief Executive and Environmental Health Officer with responsibility for sustainability and climate change, Christian Cowan. Good afternoon, all of you gentlemen, and thanks for joining us on Talking Heads today.
Good afternoon.
Now, Richard Ronan, tell me a little bit about this.
We can say the climate change has been a divisive subject. We've faced climate issues forever and a day, and one thing I've been very clear on is that where it is important to recognise the international concerns in regards to climate, it's also important to what we can achieve here on the Isle of Man. And what I have said since going to the department, I want to see more of a 50-50 approach into this, where where, as I said before, recognising the climate agendas around the world is key, and the Isle of Man has to be very much on with that. But I think more focus needs to be on how we can make people's lives better in respects to space heating, and there's so much more we can do. And I think the more we get people on with this, we can steer away from the people who are for climate change and people who are against climate change. I want to stop that, to be honest with you. It's about doing what we should be doing.
Well, Richard Lowell, let me bring you into this, because people listening to interviews like this will be saying, all right, what's in it for me? I mean, maybe not in those words, but what's in this for me? Because it sounds as though there could be all sorts of limitations to what I'm allowed to do. I'm not going to be allowed to have fires anymore, and I'm not going to be allowed to do this and that. And at the same time, we've got India burning fossil fuels left, right and centre. So why should the Isle of Man actually be disadvantaged by this when other people aren't? What's your answer to that?
I think if we get this right, the Isle of Man isn't disadvantaged by it, and that's the key point the Minister is trying to bring out. This is about what are the areas that we can work on that make a real difference for everybody's quality of life, because over 30% of our emissions are directly a result of space heating of domestic homes. So if there's things we can do to stimulate the adoption of new technology in insulation and of different heating systems that actually reduce their heating bills, that's a win for everybody, as well as reducing emissions.
Christian, let's bring you into this then, because we've got this big target for 2050. Isn't that going to be pretty much sort of self-achieving, because everybody is going for low emissions and zero this and zero that these days? Car manufacturers are reducing the emissions all the time. So aren't you going to kind of achieve these kind of savings without having to do much about it?
Well, that's what's laid out in the recent report to Tynwald. We do identify that certainly surface transport as a sector, we've identified the contribution that makes, probably slightly smaller than most people think, but it's the technology will be fed down to us from other larger jurisdictions. Certainly on the European level, the emissions per vehicle, the average emissions per vehicle, that's dropping dramatically. So we don't need to lead with that. We don't have a manufacturing sector for vehicles over here. We're not going to do the research and development and pay for all those costs, but we can develop benefit from the technology as it comes online. I think, as the Minister said, there's some things we have to do for ourselves, such as the insulating properties. The properties that we have today will at least 80% will be around in 2050 when our target's set for. So we need to be thinking about both the new build that comes online, making them as efficient as possible, but also the big retrofit programme.
I mean, we can't be having properties that have got sort of drafty windows and door frames and things like that, and people burning stuff to try and overcome that. It's just counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the first line of intervention you try and reduce the amount of heating you need to begin with.
Yeah.
Insulate and draft proof.
Yeah.
So you don't have to heat things. Then we go on to how do we change from, say, coal fires to gas, or gas to clean electric, for example. But the first intervention is to not require that energy in the first place, and that's where why efficiency is so important.
We've got our final caller on this part of the programme, and it's Eddie. Hello, Eddie.
Hello, Ashley.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask the Minister, he stated before that this new system that you can do the cladding on these houses that have to be refurbished and that people don't have to move out.
Oh, yes.
I'd just like to know why they're not doing that to Williston then.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, Eddie. Well, basically, what I'll say is that this is a new sort of technology which has come to the fore recently, where people with businesses are saying, look, what you're doing now not necessarily should be the way we are doing it. I would like to think in the future that this will be considered, and certainly through our department and certainly through the policies we're putting forward, Eddie, this could be considered in the future. But
so it's still a bit too new, is it?
Well, yes, I think it is. But we've only got a few passive houses types built here on the island, so I think it's a question of process now.
Well, just that you've got something like 20 houses here lying empty all the time because people having to be taken out of their houses into others. So there's 20 families being kept out from having a home.
But that's my point, Eddie, is to say that it's clear that there's a possibility in the future that might not need to happen.
Yeah.
And what we've got to do is to make sure that there are companies out there who are kitted to do this.
It sounds like a good system, this thing where you can do the outside of the house without having to move people out, because that disruption is a real problem, isn't it?
Yeah, but you've got to remember as well, when they're doing houses, certainly the social houses up now, to the standard of what they've been doing is to the old sort of traditional doing up a house and a little bit of insulation here and there. Is that right going forward? Will that sort of meet the targets which we've sort of put down last month? Arguably not. What we're saying is, we're not saying it's wrong. What we're saying is there may be better ways to do it. And Eddie, I would hope going forward that what I will say, as a builder myself, this sort of whole new concept excites me to say that there are better ways or newer ways to build houses, to insulate houses, and we've just got to make sure that we've got a workforce that's receptive to it.
Well, that's good.
All right, thank you for your call, Eddie.
Thanks, Eddie.
Let's just have a look at some final comments by text or email. Robin Peel says, when it comes to climate change and energy efficiency, I'd like to see more rules brought in for planning, which would see houses forced to put solar panels on the roof, the insulation to be as good as it can be, and the most energy efficient type of energy at the time installed. It feels as though that's kind of the way that things are going.
I think to use the word force is not something which we'd be keen to do. I think what we need to do is to bring people with us.
Yeah.
It's got to be right for people's pockets at the end of the day as well.
Ask your guest to explain the medieval warm period between 1000 and 1460, when the world was much warmer than it is now. No one drove gas guzzlers then. Man's effect on climate is minimal at worst. Christian?
The medieval warming period, that was it's recognised as being a specific to a small part of Europe. That wasn't recognised as being a global warming issue. That was there was a warm period, but it was specific to one area of the world.
All right.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
A potential breakthrough in cancer treatment announced this week prompted some thought-provoking comments.
It's claimed a powerful new combination of cancer drugs has brought scientists one step closer to finding a cure for the disease. Immunotherapy uses the body's own immune system to attack cancerous cells. Trials found over half of patients' advanced melanoma tumours were shrunk or brought under control. Professor Roy Herbst is a leading medical specialist at Yale Cancer Centre involved in the tests. He says the results were extraordinary.
The amazing thing is we're using the body's own immune system to target a cancer. And what could be more specific than the immune system? And we know that when we generate immunity, it's also durable. It lasts for a long time. So these new drugs are taking the immune system, the body's own immune system, and allowing it to attack the cancer. The cancer has ways to block the immune system, and these drugs unlock that block. And the results that we've seen here at the American Society of Clinical Oncology meeting are extraordinary. The data in melanoma, the skin cancer, very exciting, these two drugs. But we've also seen examples of it working in lung cancer, bladder cancer, certain types of colon cancer, head and neck cancer. It really is a new paradigm for treating cancer. And certainly it's great news for the patients. And the academic and community oncologists here at the meeting are all working now to try to even help more patients with this type of new technology.
Potentially very exciting news. That medical specialist at Yale Cancer Centre, Professor Roy Herbst, speaking to Darshini David. And speaking to us now is our friend Rob from Peel, who's got a view on this. Hello, Rob.
I lost my dad at the age of 57 to cancer. I lost a stepbrother to leukemia. And it's so great to hear that these things are developing.
Yeah.
I've got a friend in London who went on a clinical trial about 2 years ago. He's got a 6-month delay. He had 2 tumours on his brain he couldn't operate on. And they turned him down for the trial to start out with. I pressed him, and other people pressed him to go back to his consultant and get on this trial. 18 months later, he's still alive.
Good.
He's seen his 30th wedding anniversary, and he's seen his grandchild born. And I think that's marvellous that these treatments are helping people to survive longer.
Absolutely, yeah.
What bothers me is the Pandora's box, and that is that the assisted suicide is being put back on through the Commons now. It takes 2 doctors, and you give you a 6 months to live. In this case, if he'd gone for assisted suicide, he would have missed all that. It opens a real Pandora's box.
Yeah, okay.
They only ever cover out of eventuality. I don't think they can. I hope to God there's never reintroduced again in the Commons.
All right, well, it's a point of view, which, I respect your point of view. The only trouble with things like this is that your friend got on some sort of a clinical trial, which isn't going to be available to everybody. And, this new technology is probably years away from being available to everybody. So certainly in the short term, it's not a miracle cure, is it?
But remission happens in cancer as well. And people who are terminal do get remission. And I think you cannot cover every eventuality with the suicide bill. That's my thoughts on it.
All right, fair dues, Rob. Thank you very much for your call. Always interesting.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Now, should dogs be allowed in pubs and other eateries? That was the question up for debate this week after a policy change on the issue by the Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture, which was supported by the DED.
Should dog owners be allowed to take their pets into eateries? The Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture says it's something that might be more common in future, but it will be at the discretion of the owner of the establishment. And as we've heard, it's something the Department of Economic Development is in support of. DED Minister Lawrence Skelly.
We are, yes, and it's something that we've been aware of for quite some time, and it's really a market, I think, from the tourism and the visitor economy that we haven't been able to take advantage of. I know of a number of establishments that would actually accept, dogs in their place of business, and will be an enhancement and a new offering really that we will be able to promote. I think you need to think about the rural tourism aspect, and lots of people want to bring particularly their dogs on holiday. You can come here on the ferry, you can bring your dog, and now you've got the ability for them to be in establishments that want to have dogs, and that's the key principle here. The establishments themselves, the owner and the operators will need to actually want to do this, for them to participate.
Economic Development Minister Lawrence Skelly. Is this a positive shift for the island? Are you a dog owner? Do you welcome the lifting of the restrictions, or would you choose not to eat at an establishment if dogs were allowed on the premises? Are there other ways in which the island could be more dog-friendly? Can't imagine anything worse than dogs in restaurants. Pubs, fine, but I would probably go somewhere else if there were dogs. Problem is, all dog owners think that their animals are well behaved, a bit like some parents. And we all know how that works. Yes, we do, you're right. Unless they can de-hair them and stop the smell, all dogs have a certain smell. Offensive or not, animals should not mix with nice eating establishments, and you probably find it's the lower end of the market that allow them, and not more prestigious restaurants, thankfully. Yuck, says Lisa. Yeah, I'm with you, Lisa. What about people who are allergic to dogs? Yeah, what about people who are allergic to dogs? Don't fancy having a meal in a cafe by a smelly dog, and I've had dogs most of my life. Look at the BGT farce, says Bert. I don't watch those reality shows, but I did see on one of the newspaper websites something about a dog act winning the TV talent show. Badly behaved dogs are no worse than badly behaved kids. It's the owners that need training, says somebody here. Dogs in pubs, yes, why not? Better behaved in cleaner habits than children, says Liz. Well, my views on this. I don't think children and pubs mix either, and I don't care about child-friendly pubs and things like that. Nope, pubs are for grown-ups, not for children. Stu, best not give my name out, as I'll lose a lot of friends like you. I choose to have no dogs or anything else in my home, as no matter how clean they are kept, they still have a smell, nor would I wish to eat in a restaurant with a dog, maybe only a few feet away. Fine for those that are treated by their owners as babies, plus would they all be muzzled after all they do is fight and bite? Well, yeah, okay. The island should be working for a dog-free island, not welcoming dogs. I wouldn't go that far. I'll certainly not be sharing space with a dog in an eatery of any description, says Pete. A bit of a hardline approach to it. I'm respectful of other people's points of view on this, and it seems that we are outnumbered, Pete. I think most people welcome this. Let's go to the lines. We've got Viv on. Hi, Viv.
Dogs shouldn't be in shops, and they shouldn't be in restaurants or cafes.
Oh, okay.
It's not the place for them. I love dogs. I'm not against dogs. Don't think that. But to me, I don't want to be shopping and have a dog under my feet.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And Catherine and I were just talking about this earlier on. I mean, the thing is, if you've got weather like yesterday and you go into a pub or a cafe or something like that and you've got a couple of wet dogs in there, I mean,
yes.
You know, there's nothing worse. Well, there are worse things, but not many worse things than the smell of a wet dog.
No, that's quite true. But I'm sorry, I love dogs, but unfortunately, people taking them shopping and tying them up outside or taking them into shops is not on. Yeah. I'm sorry. And I know I will offend people by that, but I'm sorry, that's my point of view.
And fair dues as well. Thanks very much for calling, Viv. You can tie them up outside, Stu, like they do with horses in the Westerns, says Al. Yeah, well, I mean, the proper cowboys, they just sort of throw the what's it over a barrier thing, don't they? And the horses don't go anywhere. They don't even tie them up properly. They're missing the point, says somebody else. The debate isn't about whether or not dogs are allowed in eateries. Well, I think it is. It's the quality of pubs in the Isle of Man that's the problem. Mr. Ronan compared the Isle of Man to the Lake District, but there they only serve family meals at good value prices. We've just come back from a family holiday in Cornwall, and they're geared up for families. The policy on dogs is just tinkering. It's not going to bring more people here. The wider issue is the quality of pubs. Quite often you can't get a child's meal. In some restaurant you have to pay an adult's price for a meal, which means a family lunch costs 50 quid, which is a lot. So by making the comparison between the Isle of Man and the Lake District, it's comparing chalk with polyester, I'm afraid. Allowing dogs in the establishments won't make a blind bit of difference, in my opinion. I've been bringing my wife to... Yeah, you see... Barry the Joiner, I'm not going to read that out because it would cost you a fortune in a divorce. I thought dogs were only allowed in pubs, not restaurants. I think that was the case. To me, a pub and a restaurant are two completely different things. Don't mind well-behaved dogs in cafes or pubs that serve food, but wouldn't like to see them in dedicated restaurants. As for allergies, I've been in establishments with a cat climbing everywhere, and I'm allergic to them. I just have to keep my distance, as the allergy is not triggered by just seeing them. No, I don't think many of those allergies are they? Stu, what happens when you get 5 dogs and their owners in a restaurant and they decide to fight, or worse, mate? No good. This has been integrated by those people who think it's a good idea to let the dog lick their mouth and then say, look, he's kissing me. Yuck. Regards from Brian. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, people that let dogs lick the face. Ooh, and sleep on the bed. Oh, no. Stu, I wouldn't take my dog anywhere, a restaurant where kids are eating. Have you seen the table manners of some of these little darlings? That's from Peter in Ballasalla, who's enjoying the show. Good man, Pete. It's a while since we've had something that's made me laugh. Stu, dog fights in restaurants. No chance, says Bill. Okay. Here's a thought, Stu. To sell food, you have to declare all allergy information. Yeah, you do, in case somebody has an allergic reaction. So there'll have to be disclaimers in case somebody gets ill. There's an interesting thought as well. Yes, you do have to display allergy information and stuff on food that you sell. Say whether or not you use nuts in the kitchen, for example. So, yes, I wonder whether or not you would have to put a sign up to say dogs are allowed here. If you're allergic, then go somewhere else. Stu, I'd never let my dog sleep on the bed. She may get cold. She sleeps under the quilt tucked in by our legs, says Liz. Oh. Dogs in restaurants, great idea. Tastes all right in a stew, bit greasy but not bad. I thank you, but Stu, have you seen the slobbering dog in the Tom Hanks film? I feel ill with the thought, says Bill. Yes, I think I have, Bill. Show's turning out to be very funny, laughing my head off in the kitchen, says Shelley. Good, yeah, it's giving me a few sort of chuckles, this one today. I think everybody's taking this in a fairly good-natured way. So, there are lots of things that we've maybe not thought through properly about this. Somebody called and said pubs would have to to consider whether it would lose them more custom than it would bring in if they decided to let dogs in. I expect that that's the truth of the matter with this, and I expect that some pubs, cafes or whatever will do better because they allow dogs in, and I suspect that some of them will do worse and will decide to stop doing it. But I think that the market will sort of find its own level as far as that's concerned. Stu, if you know that you're allergic to dogs, you just don't go in. End of, says Anne. Well, yeah, into a pet shop or whatever, but you wouldn't necessarily expect to find dogs in a restaurant and stuff, would you? I'd imagine most returning visitors who come here on holiday want an outdoor sort of experience, as there's not much else to do. Therefore, maybe pubs and restaurants at specific locations, i.e. out of the way, should allow dogs. As has been said, most dogs are better behaved than children, who tend to be allowed to run riot. Surely, if it's not profitable, owners won't allow it. I'll accept that, yeah, all right. Will the restaurant owners be prosecuted if they say no to dogs, like owners who say no to gay couples are, says Liz. Provocative, can of worms. Good thinking, keep kids out and let dogs in, says Helen. Stu, some people have a real fear of dogs, says Jim. That's true as well, yeah, some people are very nervous around dogs. Stu, I can't wait to sit and enjoy a nice pint and a spot of lunch when out with my dogs. It's about time the island caught up with something that's very successful in the UK. Some of the nicest pubs I've been to have been the most welcoming to pets, especially in Scotland. There's usually a designated area for the pets, so you can choose to be near them or not. Good idea, yeah. Great topic for the show. I've laughed at most of it so far. Keep up the good work. I'm off to the pub with my dogs. Thank you very much, Peter.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week. And moves by DEFO were up for discussion on Wednesday too, when restrictions on the Queenie fishery to preserve stocks were announced for a second year running.
The Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture made the decision after considering a report from the University of Bangor confirming our Queenie population is in decline. DEFO Minister Richard Ronan has restricted the allowable total catch in the 2015 Queenie fishing season to 1,000 metric tonnes. He told Howard Kane limits have to be introduced for sustainability.
This process is not going to take 1 or 2 years. This is going to take a 3 to 5 years recovery. It was never going to happen in 1 year. I'm pleased to say that we have set up a science steering group which are working hard, and this is with different elements of the industry involved in this, which feed into our department as well.
So it's a restriction set at 1,000 tonnes total allowable catch again. This is the same as last year, and from what you're saying, we could possibly assume that we're going to have similar restrictions in years to come.
Well, I think we have to monitor as we go along. The last thing we want to do is to create problems for the fishery, because I know how hard working they are. But, at the end of the day, we don't want a situation which, when I first came into the Parliament, we heard about seasons which were, and times which were like boom and bust. We can't go back to that. This is not just about us dictating. There's a process which we followed here with the Queenie Management Board, which has full stakeholder engagement. We've got a science steering group set up now, so it feeds in, and all of the signs are that the majority of the industry are on board with this. It's just how we manage it now and the sensitivities around that.
Should more drastic measures be put in place while the stocks recover? Is a closure of the scallop beds altogether a realistic option, or would that have a devastating impact on the island's fishing industry? Could tougher restrictions be put in place without harming that industry, or is that impossible? Tell us what you think. Robin Peel called. He said, I know a lot of the fishermen in Peel, and the restrictions are hard on them. This is how they make their living, and the fleet is much smaller now than it once was. But when my dad came back from the last war, he said that there were masses of crabs at Port Grenier because they'd been left alone for 5 years. So the stocks do replenish themselves if left alone. I'm sure it's the same for all shellfish. Yes, is that the answer, or is that just would that toll the death knell for our Queenie fishing industry if we actually said, well, leave them alone for a couple of years and see how things go? Let's go to the lines. We've got Ernie waiting patiently. Hello, Ernie.
Hello there, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Now, are you an expert on this?
I'm not exactly an expert, but I've been involved in the fishing for over 40 years.
That's expert enough for me.
But I don't go to sea, I'm a shore-based...
Yeah, okay.
Trawler owner, if you want, yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you spoke to most of the fishermen individually, they would disagree with the quotas that's going on.
Okay.
They would also disagree with the scientists' findings. The scientists are going out using fishing gear that we don't use to start with.
Right.
They're going along with steel dredges and scooping up the Queenies.
So you think that their research findings might be flawed then? You think they might be wrong?
I think they're well wrong. I think most of the fishermen would think they're well wrong. At the end of last season, and we were on a quota all last season, and at the end of the season, the stuff was very plentiful on the ground.
Oh, right, okay.
Now, it hasn't been fished since then.
Yeah.
So there should be more on the ground.
Yes.
You know, unless they're dying of old age because they're not allowed to be fished, you know.
Right, okay. Well, I never thought about that. So you reckon that the scallop beds are pretty plentiful and that there's no need for a restriction?
Well, yeah, there's plentiful. I mean, I think the fishermen agree there wants to be some sort of restriction, but just to stop the free-for-all for all the world coming and fishing them, you know.
Yeah, okay. Well, how does that work, though? Because, I mean, that's a question that I've asked in the past, I'm sure, that can we not stop all these foreign trawlers coming and pinching our stocks? And people have said, well, yeah, but that would stop the Manx fleet going into other waters and fishing outside our waters. So is that how it works? Is it a sort of a quid pro quo thing?
Well, but no, well, yes, sort of. But it's basically you've got various fish management things. You've got like sort of English fish management, the Scottish and the Irish and the Welsh.
Yeah.
And the Isle of Man.
Gotcha.
And they all have to agree.
Yes.
Well, the Irish and the Scottish and the Welsh are not going to agree that they can't come and fish in our waters, are they?
I see. I see.
I mean, that's basically the way it that's, you know, it's a bit more complicated than that, but I mean, that's basically, in simple terms, that's what it is, you know.
All right. Well, thank you very much for calling, Ernie. It's nice to talk to an expert who knows what he's talking about. Let's go to line 3. We've got David on from Ballasalla. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Stu.
Yeah.
What concerns me, Stuart, is I personally think we treat our fishermen rather badly.
In what way?
Well, when you take they've got to buy the boats, they've got to buy the gear, and they put to sea, and you know, and then they're suddenly told, well, you've got to have a quota. Now, I fully realise and agree that there has to be some conservation measures to keep and preserve the stocks. But as Ernie was just saying there, you've got foreign vessels coming in and they don't fish like our guys and they take everything, and it's no wonder that our guys get a bit uptight under the collar, you know. I mean, I would myself. I think, Stuart, you know, when we're looking at these things, as with a lot of other things, farming, and we have to look at our local boys first, and then if there's anything left. But they don't seem to have any control over the likes of the seabeds outside directly outside the Isle of Man.
All right,
and I think that is where we fall down.
All right, Dave, thank you very much for your call. I don't know what the pros and cons of this are. My understanding in the past is that, you know, we can't put limits on foreign vessels coming to the island because that would limit the ability of our vessels to go further afield, but I'm not sure. Stuart, with regard to fisheries, it would appear that the queenie beds may have to be left to replenish, which may be really hard on the fishermen. Is there any sort of scheme, such as farm subsidies, that could help them to weather the storm, so to speak? As I've said before, once it's gone, it's gone, so it seems that something has to be done to help everyone concerned. That from Jan. Having spent 30 years fishing before coming ashore, ask any good fisherman and he'll tell you that there are more queenies in our waters than ever before. Really, just as there are too many well-paid scientists funded by the Isle of Man government. That's Skell in Port St Mary. So, interesting. So that's the second person who's suggesting that actually the research is wrong and that there are plenty of scallops out there. They are perhaps not queenie beds, but habitat for any other creature that lives on the seabed in these waters. I fish rod and line out here and wonder when randoms with a dredge boat were given all the power over the area. The place is a desert out there, says Keith. Yeah, I think we've talked about this in the past, and somebody who's into sort of diving has said the same thing, that it's like a moonscape once you get down to the seabed in these areas where the dredge boats are. So I think that's caused all sorts of problems over the years. But again, I'm not an expert. You see, I don't like seafood, so I can't really take much of an interest in this. I don't know how you eat it.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
The idea of civilians taking on some of the roles carried out by police officers was the topic for discussion on Thursday. as a consultation was launched covering various issues relating to the Isle of Man Constabulary.
Home Affairs Minister Ewan Watterson says outsourcing some parts of the police service will mean that trained officers will be free to carry out regular police duties. This week, his department announced a consultation into changes in the island's constabulary, sparking much debate about comments on outsourcing. But Mr Watterson says at present qualified officers are doing many of the jobs that could be done by trained civilian workers. He told Jason Roberts more.
What we're considering is having other people undertake functions that are currently done by the police. For example, you have highly trained specialist officers who are at the moment running a custody suite. Now, don't get me wrong, custody is something that you do need to be well trained to do. It's something that is well regulated, so we would need specialist people to do it. But I don't think those people need to be police officers. And that gives you an opportunity then to do things differently, to use different people to do that. And the savings that you generate, you can put into frontline policing, either in officers or in training, or IT to actually help that frontline piece.
It's not a new idea that I know you've taken volunteers on before. I mean, presumably this is just an extension of that where you're looking to deploy police officers to do police work.
Yeah, we're not looking for volunteers to do this. It could be a contracted service, which is highly likely be the way it goes. But I have seen it work elsewhere. I went to university in Lincoln, and if you go down to Lincolnshire and if you visit the custody suite there, then you will see that it's actually run by a private contractor under the supervision of a police officer, so that there is still that police direction there, the police supervision there, as was required by the law. But it means that the people actually doing the job, the booking in, the providing the meals, and just generally keeping an eye on people, don't necessarily have to be police officers. And that then frees up our officers to go out there and spend more time in communities, which is where they want to be.
Could these proposals free up officers to get on with policing, or lead to more red tape in appointing civilians to do what's currently considered police work? Would you prefer to see all functions of the police stay firmly in the hands of trained police officers? Or could this represent a sensible way of using the resources of the Isle of Man Constabulary better? First comment, Stu, in place of outsourcing manning the police stations at, I should imagine, big expense, could they not be manned by special constables and volunteers? After all, we have magistrates made up from the general public. Yeah, well, the minister was keen to sort of point out that it's not volunteers that they're looking for. I don't know, maybe it is the sort of thing that volunteers, maybe retired people could get involved in. They've got rid of a lot of police officers. I've no objection to civilians being employed by the constabulary and trained in various things, as they have in the UK, but outsourcing, and let's be honest, what is meant is privatisation. It's another thing altogether. Yeah, I think that quite a few things are sort of outsourced at the moment, you know, sort of prison transfers and things like that. Aren't they outsourced at the moment? Remember, the most vulnerable in society end up in police custody. Many of these people attempt self-harm, suicide, etc. Police officers have to do their job. Civilian staff can say, no, I'm not doing it. You can't not and keep your job. And if that's the job that you've been trained to do, then obviously you're not going to say, no, I'm not doing it, are you? Police staff have to carry out lawful orders, recipe for disaster. I suppose that there is a difference between, yes, the sort of the military or the pseudo-military style of a police force, where, you know, you've got ranks and all the rest of it. I suppose that means that you can do things differently and insist that somebody does something. But, you know, if you employ somebody, you can insist that they do it because they've signed up to that when they signed the contract. This from Andy says, I make my comments as a retired officer who's been involved in policing in the Isle of Man and the UK. Politicians make it sound like there'll be a flood of police officers back onto the streets if they freed them up from the custody suite. But I estimate it'll be around 5 in total, and that's all island and over a 24-hour period. People who are not police officers will have the right to strike and full union rights, so it has the potential to cause unrest. Oh, I'd not thought of that. I've seen this in the UK where the staff did go on strike and the police ended up having to do the jobs that they didn't want them to be doing. And union members are entitled to all sorts of payments for things, but the police aren't. They get paid what they get paid to do the job. Yeah, that would cause unrest, wouldn't it? If you've got people, private contractors, who are making a lot more than bobbies who've gone through the training. On paper, this idea looks fantastic, but it's not the golden solution that they're making it out to be. If the minister's basing this on what he's seen in Lincolnshire, that's not giving the whole picture. Good stuff. Thanks for getting in touch, Andy. It's always nice talking to somebody who's got first-hand experience of what we're talking about, so good. Another one from Ruby. Outsourcing the custody suite has been considered for some time now, at least 2 years. It requires highly skilled, trained and knowledgeable people to run it. It's not a man or a woman off the street job. As far as I'm aware, a change in legislation would be required to outsource. Is it? I mean, I'm not being funny, but how hard is it to lock somebody up and to sort of keep an eye on them and make sure that they're not doing themselves any damage? Surely it's not that highly skilled and trained, is it? I'm not having a go. I'm just saying. Still, you can say no at 3 a.m. You can't have staff arguments. The contract of employment will have to be very strict. Yeah, OK, I'll accept that. Calling all criminals the police are having trouble catching you, please hand yourselves in a Derby prison. Thank you. It's easy. That's the way to do it, maybe. Yeah, good one, thanks. All police officers start off as members of the public and are then trained. So why not take civilians and train them as custody staff? No problem as far as I can see, says Tony. Well, that's very good common sense, that, Tony. You're absolutely right, of course. You're not born a police officer, are you? You're trained to do the job. So rather than train people to do all the different things that police officers are expected to do, just train them in the skills that they need to do the bits that would release officers onto the beat. Anything that puts more cops out on the streets must be a good thing. Anyone employed in a government department is bound by a confidentiality clause in their contract too. That's from Sue in Andreas. Good idea to outsource. Bobbies on foot can talk to people and pick up information. It makes folks feel safe, says Bill. Yeah, I think I agree with that as well, Bill. Oh, and this just in. Avon and Somerset Police and Crime Commissioner Sue Mount Stevens opted to continue with the current system of running custody services using police staff after finding it would cost more to bring in an outside firm to do it. A police statement announcing the decision said it had been made after an extensive review of the business case for each option. It found that bringing in a private company to do the job currently done by police officers and civilian workers would cost taxpayers £599,000 more over a 4-year period. Please, Andy, send that into the consultation. Make sure that our politicians are aware of that.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Well, that's it for the latest look back at some of the highlights from Talking Heads. Once again, thanks to everyone who contributed to the programme, one way or another. If you'd like to hear more, you can hear the whole programme each weekday between midday and 2 p.m, or use the on-demand service on manxradio.com. To keep up to date with what's coming up on the programme each day, visit the Talking Heads page on the website, or like the Facebook page, that's Talking Heads with Stu Peters, or follow Stu Manx on Twitter. And if you'd like to get involved in the discussion, you can call, text or email us on weekdays between midday and 2 p.m. If you can't tune in at those times, but want to add your thoughts to the debate, you can do that on the Facebook page by finding the relevant topic and adding your comments. As long as you stick to the usual rules of the programme and keep what you say within reason, we'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to suggest a topic for the programme, get it to us anytime by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for this week, so until next week, goodbye.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.